Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode of the e-commerce lab by Ecomcy, the place for everything related to Amazon FBA, private label, and e-commerce. My name is Vincenzo Toscano, your host, founder, and CEO of Ecomcy. And today we bring you another special guest. His name is Ben Leonard, and he's the co-founder of Ecom Brokers. And he's also very well known in the space for having a very successful mid-seven figures exit with one of the top brands in the space when it comes to fitness, Best Girl. And today we're going to be talking about his latest release. I would say one of the top books right now when it comes to, preparing you to exiting your brand when it comes to Amazon. And the name of the book is, which I love the title, by the way, is Quit Styling and Build Your Brand. You don't need an MBA to crush it on e-commerce. That last sentence is amazing because sometimes we think that when it comes to exiting a business, you need to have all this knowledge when it comes to finance and have all these degrees. And actually, Ben is going to show you that, at the end of the day, it goes down to a few simple principles, which he highlights very clearly on his book. So, Ben, it's a pleasure to have you here on the show today. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back on. It's always great to speak with you, Vincenzo.
Thank you, bro. It's a pleasure for me as well. I've been following your career in the space for very long time now. I have seen you speak. I have seen you in different podcasts, and every single time the only thing that you do is drop bombs. So it's a pleasure for me to have you here. And the highlight of today is your book. Your book is being well received in the community. Everybody's speaking about it. People taking pictures with the book, like selfies, like you're becoming quite a celebrity in the space when it comes to this. And today I want to talk a little bit about what made you basically write this book in the first instance. However, before we jump into that, if you want, just give us a quick intro about who is Ben, and then of course we jump into the book and what people can expect from it. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for that kind intro and for having me again. I'll try and keep this brief. Some people listening will already know who I am, and I don't want to bore them. I got into e-commerce in 2016. I started a fitness brand called Beast Gear. Turns out I was good at it, so I quit my job. I grew it, and it was doing $6 million per year in sales in late 2019 when I sold it. We were selling in the UK, Europe, and a tiny bit in the Middle East and Australia. I regret not taking that brand to the US. It probably would have been 4 times bigger if I had.
Yeah.
Now I'm doing several things. Yeah, you mentioned they're Ecom Brokers. So when I sold Beast Gear, the intermediary that we used could have been better. So my accountant and I set up a better mergers and acquisitions strategy firm for e-commerce business owners to plan and execute their exits. So that's Ecom Brokers. I'm still building brands. I co-own another brand in the fitness space now. I co-own a baby brand, which is launching next year. And I have minority equity in some other brands that I advise.
Nice.
I consult with e-commerce business owners and private equity-backed brand family portfolios. And as you mentioned there, speaking, and I just finished the book, Quit Stalling and Build Your Brand. So yeah, lots of stuff going on, but it's an exciting industry to be in, and I'm very grateful to be in it.
Yeah, pleasure, man. Yeah, as I say, I've been following from the very beginning, and quite a journey, to be honest. Going from 9 to 5 job to a seller, from a seller now to basically being a consultant to helping businesses exit, and now you even have your own book. So you're basically checking all the boxes as an entrepreneur, man. You're killing it. Now, let's jump on the book, which I have right here. I have started. Love the book. So some people might be wondering, why I need to buy this book, like what is such a big deal, and I think it would be great to hear from you, the person that basically wrote this book. Just give us an overview. Let's start with basically the foundation. What made you first in the first instance decide I want to write a book, and then let's dive into the things that people can get in terms of value out of this book. Yeah,
sure. I'd been thinking about writing a book for a while, but I didn't pull the trigger on actually starting, partly because I was just so daunted about the idea of writing a book. Because I knew I was a good writer.
Like thinking of writing a book, it just all the things.
Yeah,
I imagine.
I didn't really know where to start, but I knew I was a good writer from my time in academia, right? I have an undergrad and a master's degree in science, so I know how to write, but it's writing. There's writing academic papers, and then there's writing a business book that's actually engaging, that makes people want to keep reading and then take action. So thankfully, my awesome editor was able to take my writing and turn it into something good. But I made the decision to finally go with it. It was early 2022. I was in a conference. I was at an e-commerce conference, and there was a guy on stage, and I kind of stopped and looked around at everybody, and they were all mesmerized. He had them eating out of the palm of his hand. But whilst what he was saying was not untrue, he gave no real evidence of anything he had actually done. It was all, well, you could do this, you could do that. But there was no real life lived experience. And I thought, you know what? I've got a bunch of experience here. It's good. I help people with it all the time. I wish I'd had a book like this when I was, not just when I was starting, but actually the whole time I was growing my business. And so I decided to pull the trigger and write the book. And, it's a roadmap of classic business principles, but applied to our industry of e-commerce. And what I've tried to do is make it two things. One is timeless. So it's not like a highly tactical book about, how to sell on Amazon or something that's going to go out of date in 5 months. My plan is that this will be valuable to people in 5 or 10 years. And that the other thing I've tried to do is, yes, it's a roadmap from product ideation all the way through to exit, but it's not just for people starting out. This is also for people who could be doing 7, even perhaps 8 figures, and need to realign themselves with what it takes to have a sustainable brand that becomes something valuable they can later sell, or perhaps make a big change in their business. Maybe they have a business, but they don't have a brand. Perhaps they got into e-commerce when it was pretty easy and you could just kind of sell stuff on the internet. And now they're realizing they need to make a change and build a brand that actually resonates with people, that people come to love, because that makes all the difference later when it comes to selling your business.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean that one. Let's start first with the idea that you just bring to the table, which is the example of the person on the stage. That itself is an amazing example, because I also agree with you. Sometimes we see all these people, in the space talking about this, talking about that, but realistically they don't have the, they don't actually got the hands dirty, basically, to say in some sense, like you did. Like you basically went through the whole journey of doing the brand from scratches, like from nothing, from your garage. I actually have seen some of your videos in your garage, like yourself, with the inventory and everything. And that thing is, wow, it's so authentic, man. So yeah, first of all, I love that. And I think, the idea that this book is going to be valuable for such a long time, I also find it super important, because I also agree there are so many books out there when it comes to Amazon, by within 3 to 6 months, they basically their value goes down significantly, because it's all about tips or things that work in the short term but not long term. And the thing that I love about this book is all about principles that go beyond Amazon. They are really focused on the foundation of business itself. They really focus on things that have been in the space for years, and you basically transform all the knowledge from other industry that you can doing this by yourself to actually put it on a single funnel for people specializing in the Amazon ecosystem and building a brand. So that's what I love here. Now, when it comes to the book itself, the other thing that I found super interesting is that you go to the journey of people actually realizing about what they need to do to basically get there, right? You basically divide this on 4 main phases, and I would love to go through all of them just in high level so people can have an understanding. Because one of the first one, if we can briefly start with that, is talking about what is actually stopping people from getting started. I found most people, realistically, if they put the work and effort, they can make this happen. It just they have a lot of fears, and they have a lot of things that mentally stop them to taking action. And maybe we can start with that. Like, tell me a little bit about why this first chapter was so important. I guess maybe because you also went through this, you also had these doubts about you, these fears. So
Yeah,
tell
you're
me a little
right.
bit. Yeah.
It's semi-autobiographical in that sense,
Yeah.
because I had my idea for my first brand in 2012. I didn't do anything about that idea until 2016.
Wow. Yeah.
So for 4 years, I did nothing. And really, the reason I did nothing was I was held back by excuses.
Mm.
Excuses which were partly my fault and partly just the fault of society.
Mm.
I told myself, and some of this wasn't even conscious. I wasn't consciously telling myself, but subconsciously telling myself, I'm not an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs are other
Mm-hmm.
people. They are people with business degrees. They are people who invent new things. They are people who are experts in design. They are people with tons of capital from, a family business that they've inherited. Um, I kind of was in my lane, right? I was working as an environmental advisor. That was what I did because of my background in environmental science. It
Mm-hmm.
that's what society teaches us, right? We go to school, we might go to university,
Mm-hmm.
we stay in our lane, we go get a job in whatever we're in. And entrepreneurs are other people. But actually, it wasn't until I had a heart problem that I took action on my idea, really out of necessity. I needed something to do because I couldn't work and I couldn't do my fitness hobbies. So I started this fitness brand as a hobby. And I've now come to realize that I should have taken action right at the very beginning when I had the idea in the first place. And I want other people to do the same thing as me, which is give themselves permission to treat themselves like a real entrepreneur, and by extension, treat their business like a real business, not just some side hustle. Yes, we're going to
Mm.
start it on the side, of course we are,
Yeah.
but we're going to treat it like a big, real grown-up business. Because if we don't and we treat it like a side hustle, it will always be a side hustle because we're putting a
Exactly.
ceiling on what it can achieve because of our mindset. So that's what the start of the book is all about. It's about giving yourself permission to take action. It's about treating yourself and your business with respect. And it's about busting the excuses and the myths that we teach ourselves and that society teaches us about who entrepreneurs are and who can and can't be one.
Exactly. Yeah, even I mean, I connect so much with this because I'm a big believer. I mean, I'm a bit aggressive when it comes to being entrepreneur. Like, I'm a big believer on this phrase that I think it's from Tony Robbins, if I'm not mistaken. Like, when you want to do something in life, just burn all the ships, right? It basically
Mm.
don't give you any other option for you when it comes to any other thing, and basically you stop yourself from giving options to fail in some sense, right? And
Yeah.
this goes back to, yeah, your mindset that, if you have this thing as a side hustle, your mind, the back end is thinking, okay, this is just a plan B or plan C. If it doesn't work out, I have my 9 to 5. I don't have to put on so much effort. If on a Saturday or a Sunday I don't feel like working on the business, it's fine because it's not my main thing. And these small things over time start to catch up and basically stop you, as you mentioned, to really overcome that ceiling that you put yourself above your head. So super important. And I love the phrase that you put is like, give yourself the opportunity to do so, right? Most people don't give themselves the opportunity because they just think, they're just afraid to fail, or they're just afraid of basically showing to the friends or family that they basically it didn't work out. But at the end of the day, that's it's all about giving it a try and giving your best. If the only thing you are thinking is about the failure you're gonna have, like we as entrepreneurs, I mean, how many failures do you had on other ventures? I bet you had other failures, right? It's
Oh
all
yeah.
about overcoming that fear,
Yeah.
and,
So
and take
there,
action.
there were. It's interesting you mentioned failures there. So I had a lot of failures during owning my first brand. I still have
Mhm.
failures now with my other business ventures. I make mistakes all the time, and that's normal. In fact, we want to, you know, um, I'll go off on a little tangent here for a moment. A few weeks ago, I spoke on stage with Stephen Bartlett
Mhm.
of Diary of a CEO, and one of the things that he spoke about was increasing your failure rate is something that you should be trying to do.
Yeah,
Because by increasing your failure rate, you are increasing the rate at which you will find successes, right?
exactly.
It's a bit like what Michael Jordan said. He became so successful because he failed so many times.
Yeah.
And so I now try to do that. But before my first business, Beast Gear, I actually didn't have any failures, and here's why. Because I didn't take any chances or any risks. I didn't do anything. I had ideas, but none of them
Mhm.
turned into failures because none of them even started,
Yeah.
or they barely started. I remember one idea I had. This was shortly after reading The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. I had this idea
Mhm.
that I would start a website where Americans, or predominantly Americans, could come to input their interests as it related to a potential vacation in Scotland, and that I would create itineraries for their trip,
Oh,
and they would
that's
pay me for
interesting.
them. Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought it was a pretty cool idea at the time, and I did absolutely nothing about it. And that's just one in many kind of lines of ideas that I did nothing about until I had this big change and this heart problem that caused me to finally take action on Beast Gear.
Yeah. And you know what? At the end of the day, all these things we're talking about, it even goes back to simple math in the sense that, I love the fact that increasing the rate of failure is proportional to rate of success, because I'm a big believer that you create your own luck, right? And
Yeah.
the more things you basically try in terms of, keep pushing on things that you want to pursue in life, it's a matter of time when that specific opportunity meets with you as being preparing yourself in your own time while you've been failing. And when those two things unite, that's when usually the explosion comes, and success comes. So yeah, big believer of that. Like, I think the best skill usually I would advise an entrepreneur to have is just be comfortable failing. If you're comfortable failing, like, you basically lose all your fair. And if you're not afraid of anything, like, what is stopping you? So super
Yep.
important.
Yeah, I'm totally aligned with you there.
Now, uh, once we overcome also all this fear and we basically decide to take action, the next step is to actually design the strategy, right? We need to basically figure out, like, where do I even get started? Like, how do I find my right audience? So how do I actually target the right type of interest on a specific niche to basically build my product lineup, right? So maybe high level, you can give some advice, and also the reason why you think this is the most important step once you overcome
Yeah.
that fear.
So sure. So some people will disagree with what I'm about to say, but I'm gonna explain both sides of this approach. Okay. So my approach is that we need to build a brand that we're passionate about and sell to people we understand. Because when we do that, when we know our audience, we understand them well enough that we can basically sell them anything. We know
Yep.
what appeals to them. We know what problems they have, and therefore we know what products to create to solve those problems. We know the language they speak, so we know how to communicate with them. We know where they are on the internet, so we know how to get in front of them. And we know what kind of content they want to consume, so we know how to give them value and make them know, like, and trust us and want to buy from us. Now, when you do all that, it is way easier to try to build a brand, right? If I'm interested in, I don't know, bonsai plants, it's easier for me to create a brand of bonsai maintenance accessories because I understand who I'm selling to, because I am that person. But if I don't understand, it's much, much harder, and I'm more likely to fail. Now, some people listening will say, but Ben, I have built a business that sells X, and I'm not really interested in X, but it works. To which I would say this: chances are you got into that when it was easier, when you could just kind of sell stuff on Amazon, or you could just kind of buy traffic off of Facebook pretty cheaply and drive it to your website, which probably wasn't that good of a website, and make bank. But actually, if you're starting now, you should really build a business around an audience that you resonate with. Apart from anything else, isn't it so much more satisfying to get up every day in the morning and build something that you're passionate about? A huge part of what I teach people to do is actually make yourself the face of the brand, which you can't do if you're not interested in the business. You're not interested in the brand. So I try to teach people to not only build a brand around a niche that they're interested in and passionate about, but put yourself on the front of that brand and make yourself the face of it, because people buy from brands, but they connect with people. So when somebody in your potential audience finds someone that they resonate with, they connect with, they know, they like, they trust, they are way more likely to buy from you and your brand by extension. And this, people will say, but Ben, that doesn't work at scale. Yes, it does. Here's just one example. Deliciously Ella. This is Ella. She started a recipe blog. She spun that out into recipe books and a podcast to support that, where she provides helpful, compelling, engaging, useful, free content. And people keep her brand top of mind. So then they go buy her digital products and her physical book products. And now she's even spun it out into a range of food items that I can buy in the supermarket. By the way, all her stuff is vegan. I'm not a vegan. I just respect her
Mhm.
marketing, her branding. She even has had physical stores, delis where people can go in and buy stuff, all building it around her being the face of the brand. Now, not everyone's going to want to do that. You don't have to. That's not like a central part of what I
Yeah,
teach.
yeah.
I do think that that can be part of it. So that is a long way of saying it's audience first, product second.
Yeah, I think, and it totally makes sense because I see this mistake all the time that people, only focus on numbers and where the money is, which in some sense makes sense. Of course, you want to focus where the money is and where the most traffic is. But the thing is, if you don't really understand this market, uh, first the difficulty is gonna be exponentially much higher than if you actually know the market in the first instance. Like things are not gonna come to you naturally in terms of strategies because you need to first figure out what is the avatar looking like, and what they need to basically convert towards your offering. So that thing makes the job so much more difficult. And I think the other thing that you mentioned there that's super interesting, which I think is the most important thing here, is
Mm.
actually how you feel when you wake up every single morning about what you're building, right? If you're
Yeah.
building this only for money, let's be honest, it's gonna reach a point that you're gonna burn out, right? Especially when things get tough, when things are not working out. But if you really focus on your passion and you know that on top of that, you're bringing value to that community that you thrive so much about, like if you're into yoga and you bring this amazing brand of lineups, of lifestyles when it comes to providing support to people that love yoga, like not only you're providing so much value to this community, you know that you're part of it, and that don't make things so much easier, and actually inspire you so much more. So
Yep.
I guess to summarize this point, and we can both agree on this, is like start with things that you love, right? When it comes to building a brand, like try to find, I guess, niches and interests around your daily things, maybe, or your hobbies, and see if there is an opportunity first when it comes to doing a brander, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we're all going to go through struggles in our business. But let me just pick one, right? Cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge one. People run into this issues with cash flow all the time. If you're running into issues with cash flow on a business which, and maybe perhaps you're trying to treat it like a real brand, but you have no real interest in it, it's way more of a struggle to overcome
It's
those
painful.
problems. Yes, painful. But actually, if there's so much other things going on in the brand that you're enjoying, overcoming the parts that are difficult becomes so much easier, because you are so
There's a
much more motivated
purpose.
to get
There's a
through it. And
purpose
there's a
besides the
higher
money.
there's a higher purpose, right?
Yeah.
We're all in this to make money, but we can make money while building something of value in terms of our values that aligns with us. And that's an important part of the book that I talk about. I talk about actually developing what I call your brand DNA. And some people listening will be like, but Ben, come on, my business doesn't really have a brand DNA. I'm just kind of selling stuff online. I'm doing really well. To which I would say it would be even better if you had a real brand DNA,
Yeah.
because your customers would resonate more with your brand, be more likely to keep buying from your brand, and you would have more of a valuable asset that somebody's going to want to buy in the future. Because, fast forward to basically the end of the book, actually, I talk about, and this is what we do with Ecom Brokers all the time, we talk about this model that we created called the value pyramid, where we look at the business from the point of view of the buyer. And right at the base of the value pyramid, the thing that actually holds the whole pyramid up is brand. Because ultimately, that actually, some buyers will tell you it's not what's most important to them, but actually it is. They just don't know it, right? Brand actually is what's most important to them, because without brand, there's no longevity, there's no
Exactly.
sustainability, there's no raving fans waiting by the door for your product to arrive. There's no people following you on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, your
Yeah.
podcast. There's nothing there that a buyer is going to want to see in the future. And if you don't have that, you really are building your business on quicksand. And that
Yeah.
is why brand is so important. And when you base that brand around something you're passionate about, it's the whole thing is eminently easier.
Yeah. Which now this bring us to the last part, which is basically the part 3 and 4 of the book, which you focus on the actual business strategy. I think what you
Yep.
mentioned, there you just nail it. Like, people are not don't focus on brand. I think the most important thing they're missing out, I'm sure you agree with this, is that, let's be honest, on this business, when you make the most money is when you exit the business. It's not really when you are actually operating the business, right? Because you also
Yeah.
have these cash flow issues. You need to keep reinvesting, more inventory, more marketing. So realistically, you keep diluting your profits, and basically the money is made on the actual exit itself. So the reason why I say this is important is because if you only focus, just as you mentioned, on the quick buck, you basically are just a brand, here quotes, that the only thing you really can provide as value is cheaper product, a lower price, better bundle. But realistically, are you actually offering something on top of that as a community, as a brand, as a feeling, as a lifestyle? And that's where I think preparing towards exit, which is the last part of on today's episode I want to cover, is super important, because realistically that's where you get your big win, right? Like when you exit your brand, and if you don't build from the very beginning on building that we have seen this the last 2-3 years, like even now, that the market is very low when it comes to selling businesses on Amazon. The ones that are still thriving are the ones that actually build something meaningful, an actual brand, an actual
Yep.
community, not the ones that they just had a water bottle that they
Yeah.
just had the cheapest price on Amazon, right? So,
You're right. I
so can
mean,
we quick cover those quick points to
we
conclude on
sure
that? Yeah,
can. So it's funny. I had a conversation yesterday with a
yeah.
guy who we can't sell his business for him yet because of a few things. Partly his margin isn't high enough,
Mm-hmm.
and partly the growth of his business isn't high enough. But also, there's no brand identity there. Now, if he had a strong brand identity, that would somewhat make up for the stagnant growth and the low margin. I would also argue that if he had a better brand identity, he'd probably have a higher margin because he could probably charge a more premium price and people would be more willing to pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
Contrast that with another business that we're about to take to market with a $2 million SDE with a phenomenal brand identity, raving fans that are subscribed to this guy's product. We're going to go and sell that for well over 10 million because we're still getting strong multiples for quality brands. Okay. Now, a lot of people might say, well, Ben, Vincenzo, you kind of been talking a little bit wishy-washy about intangible things like brand here. Let's talk about numbers. Well, there is a mistake that people can make is when they're getting so caught up and passionate about their product and their brand, which is great. I want them to do that, but they forget the numbers. And the big one that I see the mistake that people make is during their product validation, they do some rough calculations and they realize that their product is profitable and they think, fantastic, I can go sell this. But they failed to run the numbers on their ROI, their return on investment. And this is why they then later run into cash flow problems. So it's important that we understand our ROI because this basically tells us for every dollar we put into our business, how much do we get back? And the reason that's so important is that in e-commerce, we have a really slow cash conversion cycle. So after we've paid for our inventory, we've paid to have it shipped, and that takes a long enough time as it is, it's then sitting in warehouses gathering dust while it slowly sells, right? And we need to then go pay our manufacturer to make more, but we haven't got all the money out of our inventory yet. Our cash is tied up in inventory. So we need a high enough return on investment that we get enough out of the inventory we have sold so far so that we can go buy more while the rest is still being sold and sitting in storage. And the calculation for this is very simple. You basically take your profit. It's actually your contribution margin, but we won't get into that. It's getting too technical for today. So we'll just say you basically take your profit and divide it by your landed costs and multiply that by 100, and that will give you a percentage. And if it's more than 100%, you've basically got a good enough ROI because you're going to get back for every dollar you put in, you're going to get back that dollar plus whatever it is over 100. So if your ROI is at like 150%, you're going to get back $1.50 plus your original dollar, so $2.50 in total, which means you're going to have enough money to keep growing. But if your ROI is less than 100%, you're not going to have that. And I would say the minimum ROI you want to have is probably 70-80%, but be aware that you're probably going to keep needing to throw cash into the business to keep it growing. That's okay if you can do that, and if you have sources of capital. And again, that's something I get into in the book. But basically, what I'm getting at is if you want to build a brand that you can eventually sell, you need to really understand your numbers and validate your products very, very carefully way back at the beginning.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben. I think, with this is a perfect, conclusion of today's episode, which basically went from, the very beginning of, losing that fear to the end, which is basically how we actually make money. So I think now is a perfect time to, conclude this conversation about your book. I will say for everybody, hearing, I mean, if you're hearing, you cannot see me holding the book, but if you're watching, like, this really a must. Like, can you tell me, Ben, and to everybody listening and watching, like, where people can find this book and can
Yep.
start, preparing their exit?
Yeah, absolutely. People won't be surprised to hear it's on Amazon. Go to quitstallingbook.com to sign up for the bonuses. But if you just search "Quit Stalling" and "Build Your Brand" on Amazon, you'll find the book. It's on there. At the end of every chapter, you get a link to free resources where you can also join the waitlist if you want for the course that goes alongside the book. I believe it's a really, really valuable book. I'm incredibly proud of it. So I'd be really honored if people would go check it out.
Yeah, I can definitely confirm that. So definitely go and buy it. And make sure to leave a review, guys. Review is super important.
It's all about reviews.
Awesome, Ben. So it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for everything that you bring to the community. It's always great to have you and pick your brain. So, can't wait to see you at future events. And in the meantime, keep killing it. It's been
I will.
great to
Thanks.
have you.
Thanks for your support, Vincenzo. It means a lot.
Anytime, man. Have a nice one. Bye bye.
Cheers.